Oh gosh, what? Oh God. What a time I just had trying to get that all ready. Guys, I am so sorry. So sorry about how long it's taken me to go live. Oh, honestly, everything was going wrong. I am so sorry. I really hope that you guys can join me here and everything is okay. Um, I'm just, I've got my computer over here. I've had to come live on my phone just because I was originally going to come live on the computer. It was not having it at all. So I really hope that you guys have found this stream, that you can hear me okay. I'm just going to just keep it going for a little bit, just to make sure that everything is running the way that it should be. So I'm going to, I've got two screens up because for some very strange reason, my phone doesn't like to show me comments that are left on live streams in real time. So I'm just going to just fiddle around a little bit more with the chat and with just the settings. Hi guys, I can see some of you are joining me now. I'm so sorry about how late the stream is, about all the confusion about which stream we were going on. I just had major technical difficulties and the original stream corrupted itself and was just, I couldn't use it. It was saying I was live and then it wasn't, but thank you so much for joining me here. I'm really sorry about all those technical difficulties and how late it is. So yeah, give me a wave, drop me a comment if you're here. It's so good to see that you're here. Thank you so much for coming. I'm just going to keep glancing over here because this is where I can actually see my messages. So yeah, I'm just going to give it a little bit just to make sure that everything is running the way that it should be. Oh, I hate technical difficulties. But let's put those technical difficulties behind us now. We are here. It is the big day. I am smiling. I really hope that you guys are in a good mood too, that life is treating you well. And thank you so much for coming along to the live stream. So it is, today's the day, the 10th anniversary edition of Blindsighted Wanderer is out in the world. I kind of can't believe it that it's been 10 years since that little book came into the world. And I just keep thinking back to little baby author me holding that book in her hands for the first time. And it's very strange because this is a very similar feeling to that. You get the same kind of feeling whenever you release any book. But this one is kind of different for me just because it's not a new book in a sense. It's the one that started it all for me. It's my Snow White in a way, if you wanted to go Disney on me for a moment. And to be re-releasing it in hardback and celebrating the fact that it is 10 years now, or we're coming up to 10 years, is so strange. It's got that amazing excitement that I always feel whenever a book is released, but it's also got a real nostalgia to it and real sense of pride to see how far it's come, how far I've come with it, all these characters that have walked with me for so long. So I wanted to do this live stream so I could celebrate this moment with all of you, no matter where you are in the world, because I am going to be having an actual signing for the book in a couple of weeks' time, but I know that a lot of you guys, it's not possible for you to get to that event, to get to Chester, or even to get to England. So I wanted to do this for all of us so that we could all come together, as many of us who want to come together to celebrate this. I'm going to answer some questions. So if you do have any questions that you want to ask me, not necessarily about the book, but about writing in general, about anything, then please do drop them down in the chat and I will keep an eye on the chat. I've got my eye on it over here so I can answer them when I see them. So please do drop your questions down below. I'm going to be telling you guys a little bit about the book. I've had a couple of questions sent in to me, so I'm going to start with those. But if you have a question of your own that you want to ask away, and I promise that if I see it, I will answer it. Okay. So where do I even begin with this story? This story came from such I remember the exact time when I was first exposed to the story that would transform itself into Blindsighted Wanderer. So I'm just noticing some more people have joined the chat. If join the live stream, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I will answer them. Yeah, I remember the exact moment. I was in primary school. I was 7 years old, and I was always really big on poetry and stuff, and like reading all different kinds of things when I was very young. And I came across the poetry of William Charles Buchanan, and he wrote. I didn't read as much of his poetry as I did other poets like Wordsworth or Byron, but at the same time, he wrote these very specific poems, which basically were about these water nymphs called the Azrai. And the whole idea behind them was that they were made of the mist and the moon ray mild, and they were these magical beings that lived in lakes, and they came up by the light of the moon to dance on the surface of the water. And that whole visual just fascinated me when I was a kid. And then when I was in primary school, I was about 7 years old, we were given these little leaflets, and it was all filled with folklore of various watery places. So we had some from the sea, like we had Selkies, and we had the Loch Ness Monster from Scotland. But we also had a written variant of the Azrai folktale, which is linked quite closely, even though not a lot of people know about it, to Cheshire and Shropshire, the area where I grew up in Cheshire. And it basically told this story about this very arrogant fisherman who decided to fish the dangerous waters of the Great Lake that bordered his home. But instead of hauling up a net full of fish, he hauled up an Azrai. And she begged and begged him to set her free, because if the sunlight touched her, she would melt into a pool of water. But all that the fisherman could think about was how much money this creature was going to make him if he took it home. So he ignored her cries, even when she grabbed his hand and begged for her life, and the touch of her hand was so cold that it left a mark on his palm as if it had passed through fire. And the fisherman just ignored her and rowed back to the lake shore. By the time he got there, the sun had risen. And when he looked under the reeds that he had thrown over her to basically shut her up, she had indeed melted into a pool of water. And this folk tale absolutely fascinated me. Even when I was a little kid, it was one of the first folk tales that I really majorly remember being fascinated by. And it just made me think, because I'd read and heard so many mermaid stories and stuff about how the mermaid's beauty was led to the doom of sailors and fishermen and all sorts. But the thing that fascinated me about the Azrai story was the fact that the nymph, the mermaid's beauty, in a sense, was her own undoing, albeit not against her will. But the thing which I kept coming back to it, I kept this folktale in my mind, and it just would not go away. And as I got a bit older, I began to think on it a lot and think to myself, what would have happened if the Azrai had actually managed to get away from the fisherman? She hadn't died, she had escaped, and she was angry. She was so, so angry. And what exactly would that lead to? What would she be capable of? What would she do to get her own back, in a way, for what had been done to her? And from that question of what if, which is my general go-to question for anything in regards to writing, the story began to spin itself into life. And it wasn't an overnight thing. It took a very, very long time for the story to distill itself into what was eventually the final version. But all the same, I'm just I have here one of my old copies. So this is the second edition copy. This was the copy that was put out in 2016 after I regained the publishing rights for it. But it's been quite a long journey to get to this point, and I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about it. So I'm going to start off by answering some of the questions that I was sent. If you guys do have any questions, as I've mentioned, stick them down in the chat. I will keep an eye on the chat constantly. I've just got it over here on another screen so I can actually see it. But the first question that I'm going to ask, I was sent these in and I've just organised them as best I can into sort of an easy thing for me to work through. So I'm just having a look at them here. So how long did it take you to write the book? So the original version of Blindsighted Wanderer was written, I can honestly give you the exact dates. It was written between the 1st and 29th of February 2007 when I was 15 years old. And I wrote it. It was actually a sort of challenge to myself. So I was writing novels by that time. I think by that point I'd already written 2 or 3. But I was determined that I was going to write a novel within 1 month, and that's essentially become my standard. I basically came up with this way of writing back in around that time period, which I still use. I still utilize it to this day, and that's what allows me to be able to write my first drafts so quickly. But this was the first time that I'd ever done it, and I set myself this personal challenge to see if I could do it. But even more of a personal challenge was the fact that I was 15, I was still in high school, and I was doing it all around my homework and around revising for exams, because I was in the lower sixth form at this point, preparing to go into the lower sixth form. And I just remember when I did it, because bear in mind, this is 2007, and I didn't have a laptop at that point. And my family and I were staying in this beautiful old Victorian cottage. So I had my computer, which I would use for writing usually, but I didn't have it with me. It was a proper old, chunky late 90s computer with, and it was just so old. And I couldn't bring it with me. It just wasn't portable. So what I ended up doing to add to the challenge was I wrote the entire first draft by hand. And I still have it somewhere in a binder file. I wrote the entire first draft by hand. I illustrated it by hand, and I was determined to get it done before the end of February, within the month of February. So whenever I had a spare 5 minutes, whenever I was on my lunch break at school, I would go to the library and I would scribble away in the corner, and then I would sit up in the attic of this old Victorian cottage and I would write into the early hours of the morning before I had to get up and go to school. And I managed it. I did it. I wrote the first draft within a month, completely by hand, with it, like I say, even February, within the month of February. And to this day, especially considering that I did it by hand, I'm still stunned that I managed to do it. But after that, I left it for a little bit. I knew it was a first draft. I knew it wasn't the final version. It never is. And I left it for a while just to let it gel with itself and just figure out all of the creases and just get it to what it needed to be. And then I went back to it a couple of years later and I rewrote it. And then I went back to it a couple of years later again and rewrote it again. And it continued on like that for a while until we came to 2011. And in 2011, I'd written a couple of more novels, including Tragic Silence, that was written as well at that point. And I was looking at getting published. So I rewrote it again. So if you were to combine it all together, from the very first draft right up until the very last draft, probably about 4 years. But every single time that I went back to it, it was about a month each that it took. So yeah, 4 years, but 4 months over 4 years, if you know what I mean. It's weird when I think of it like that. Okay, next question. How old were you when you wrote it and when it was published? So, as I mentioned, when I wrote the first draft, I was 15. And then when I went back to it, I was 17 and then 18 and then 20. And I was 21 when it was first published. So, funnily enough, I actually found out that I got the offer for Blindsighted Wanderer's publication and found out that I had passed my university degree on the same day. So that was amazing. And that was actually around this time of year, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to release the special edition around this time of year. Plus, as well, Blindsighted Wanderer takes place at midsummer, so this is just a perfect time to release the 10th anniversary edition. The the actual time when it was published, I was still 20 when I received the offer of publication, and then it was eventually published when I was 21, and that was in November 2012, on the 19th of November. I'll never forget that date. So yeah, that's how old I was. So I was pretty young, all things considered, a little baby author. It wasn't my first attempt to get published. I had been trying to get published and get an agent and all of that stuff ever since I was about 15 years old. And looking back, I can see why I didn't manage to get an agent and publisher. I'm my own biggest critic and my own worst enemy when it comes to writing. But I hold my hand up and say that at that tender young age, I was not ready. My skill was nowhere near high enough. I was writing to the best of my skill, and to be fair, it was pretty high, but it wasn't high enough, and I hold my hand up to that. But with Blindsighted Wanderer, it really struck a chord with my first publishers, and they went on to publish not only the first edition of Blindsighted Wanderer, but also the first edition of Tragic Silence. So yeah, it's been a long time since I was attached to a publishing house, but I do owe them a lot, and I'm really grateful to them. The old Staccato publishing team from Minnesota, US. Okay, why did you choose this for your first book? Well, it was kind of weird actually, because when I was put in touch with Staccato, my original publishers, I actually didn't send them just Blindsighted Wanderer. I also sent them Tragic Silence, and they accepted both of them simultaneously. And they were the ones who chose that Blindsighted Wanderer would be the first of the two that would come out. And I was happy with that because it wasn't. I was happy with it because I knew that Tragic Silence was going to have other books. And even though I knew that they were all going to be standalones, I still needed time to make sure that that idea was going to work. Because again, bear in mind, when I wrote Tragic Silence, I was still in my late teens, and the amount of planning that I had to do was insane, especially considering I was still in school and had so many other things that I needed to think about. So I was glad that Blindsighted Wanderer was first because it was a standalone. It was a nice little sweet contained story. It didn't have any strings attached. What you saw was what you got. And that's still the case. I think it's still a very nice, sweet little standalone. It hasn't it still has its essence, the essence that I saw when I was first writing it. It just came alive like this beautiful painting. All of my books have a very distinct vibe that I feel when I'm writing them, and I can see their colours and just feel their textures. And this one was just like watching a gorgeous Renaissance painting come to life. I was so swept up in how beautiful it was. So I'm really glad that that one was my first book. And like I say, I didn't really have much of a choice, considering that I sent in two books at the same time. But I'm glad that that one turned out to be my debut. Okay, why is it set in the 13th century? I know. Well, to be honest, when I was first planning it, I really wanted it to be have this kind of medieval kind of setting. Now, Really, when you look at the original source material, the poetry of Robert Williams Buchanan and the folk tale of the Azrai, both of them are actually come from the Victorian period. So it would have been the easy option for me to have gone with the Victorian period for the setting, but I didn't want to. Because for as much as I love the Victorian period, and I always have, in a way, it felt too close to modern to the modern period that we're in. I wanted this story to feel pretty timeless, like it could happen anywhere at any time to anyone. And for that reason, I wanted to give it this sort of far away kind of aspect, and sort of make it into a folk tale, fairy tale thing in its own right, forgetting the fact that it had been inspired by a folk tale and by those kinds of things. So I thought, okay, I want it to be medieval, but I also don't want it to be set during a period of the Middle Ages or around the Renaissance where we know that there's a lot of real huge historical things going on. I didn't want it to be connected to any real country or any real people or any real historical events. I just wanted it to have that historical grounding in the way that people spoke, the way that they dressed, to give it that far away aspect that it could be anywhere. So for that reason, I eventually settled on the 13th century, the early 1200s, because purely from the association, we're coming out of the Dark Ages in that period. So it's this period of basically where the culture and the understanding of things essentially goes right down. We don't know a lot about it. And even though it's not necessarily linked to the actual historical Dark Ages, the fact that Blindsighted Wanderer is set in that time period in the 13th century is just a little bit of a nod to that period where it would have been so easy to point fingers and to just be so suspicious of the other and of anything that was different. And that was really the crux of the story. That was what I wanted the story to embody. The whole idea that it's not necessarily you don't need heroes, you don't need villains, you just need people who are misguided, who are ignorant of the other, who act on their emotions without necessarily thinking it through. That was what I wanted the story to revolve around. I didn't want a baddie. I didn't want a major good versus evil thing. I've seen that before. I wanted this to just be a nice, simple, sweet story. A simple story, but the simplicity is its power. And that's why I wanted to do that with it. Okay, so as I'm answering these questions, guys, if you have any of your own, drop them in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on the chat in case any questions pop up. I'm just answering the ones that have been sent in to me ahead of time. And once again, I want to apologise for those of you who are joining the stream now for the lateness of the stream and all the technical difficulties, the fact that we are now on a new stream than the one that I originally put up. I hate computers sometimes, let's just leave it at that. Okay, leading on from that question about the 13th century, was it hard to write period language in the story? Yes and no. So, strictly speaking, if we were being absolutely historically correct, the language that is used by the characters when they're speaking in their dialect would be completely unintelligible to a modern reader. So historically, 13th century, we are looking at either Latin or Middle English. And Middle English, even though it's technically English, is nothing like modern English. Unless you really you're a linguist or you know the history of language, you wouldn't really be able to read it very easily. It wouldn't, and even then you would probably have to concentrate quite a lot. So I struck a compromise. As I said, it's not meant to be a specific historical time, place, etc. There is a little bit of elbow room there, and I wanted that from the start. So for that reason, instead of using the historically accurate Middle English, I went with a slightly adapted form of what would be considered early modern English. So this is the kind of language that you see in Shakespeare, that you see in sort of things that were written when the printing press first came out, and sort of around sort of the 17th century. It's it's similar enough to modern English that people can pick up on it. If any of you guys have seen the Robert Eggers movie, which then you know what I'm talking about. Pretty much all of that movie was in early modern English. It is still understandable to a modern listener, watcher, reader, whatever. It is still understandable, but at the same time, it's different enough, and you just have to concentrate that little bit. I didn't want Blindsighted Wanderer to be something that you, in a sense, really had to concentrate on to understand. So that's why I say it's an adapted form of early modern English. If it's not pure early modern English, that would be too much. I felt. So I compromised a little bit. We have some of the structure in there, like thou and thee and dost and those kind of words that you would hear, and the context is sort of the same. It's more the same in some places than others, but again, that's just for ease for a modern reader, and that was a decision that I consciously made just to make things a little bit easier. It wasn't particularly difficult for me to write that because I've read Shakespeare when I'm not a linguist, but I've always been very fascinated with the history of the English language, and I studied it a little bit while I was in high school, actually, while I was writing the first draft of the book, funnily enough. And I became absolutely fascinated with it, and I can certainly read it now, early modern English, and not really bat an eye, but it's I think it's a beautiful way of using the language, but at the same time, you just have to see a thou or a thee, and it immediately transports you to somewhere centuries and centuries ago, rather than having medieval characters speaking as if they had just been taken out of the 21st century and plopped into the 13th. I wanted to give it that grounding, so that's why I did that, and I found it not as difficult as people might have thought I did. So just to reiterate, guys, thank you for joining me for the stream. I'm just keeping an eye on the little thing at the top, which tells me like how many of you are here. So thank you for joining me. I'm really sorry about all the confusion and all of the technical difficulties and the lateness. It wasn't really anything that I could do. I did my best. So thank you so much for coming here and joining me on this stream. If you have any questions that you want to ask me, drop them in the comments below in this live stream chat, and I will get to them. I'm just keeping an eye on things over here while I answer the other questions. Okay, where did the idea of the Azrae come from? So as I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, the Azrae themselves, the water nymphs of the story, they are inspired by the Azrai or Azray. The spelling differs between where the source is from. They came from the works of the Victorian poet Robert Williams Buchanan, and also the Cheshire, Shropshire legend of the Azrae, which tells of the greedy fisherman who pulls the Azrae out of the lake and refuses to let her go. So the idea of them came from that. So there's a lot of the normal, normal's the wrong word. There's a lot of the typical things that you associate with an Azrae in my version of them in the story. So they can walk on water, they can breathe underwater, they come up to the surface of the water of the lakes to age under the light of the full moon, and they dance under the full moon, and the sunlight can't touch them, otherwise they'll melt into a pool of water. All of that comes from the original sources, the poetry of Robert Williams Buchanan and the original folk tale from Cheshire. So that's where that idea came from. The idea of making them extremely long-lived was something that the story just called for. If you guys have read the story, you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to say anything more, otherwise I'll spoil it for you. But yes, it was very important for me that they had that longevity to them in order for the story to work. There's a question being left for me down in the comments from Emma. Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for joining me, and thanks for your question. Yes, I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm just reading it over here because I can't see, they're not popping up on my phone for some reason. Just wanted to ask what the characters are like, and are they based on anyone in particular? That's a good one. So the characters themselves, we haven't got a single protagonist in this. Hi, Courtney. I love you too. We don't have a single protagonist or single central character in this story, actually. The story is split over three main characters, four if you really wanted to get picky. So we have Queen Meryn, who is the queen of the Azrai. We have two brothers called Raphael and Silas. And we also have Irima, who is a traveller girl who comes in and helps them out. And basically, the whole idea of the story is that it jumps between these characters and their interactions with each other, and it's only by sort of weaving together and coming across each other that the story not only progresses but resolves itself. They all have a part to play. Now, the characters themselves, we have Meryn, who is an Azrai, so she is an extremely powerful being. She's very long-lived. She lives underneath the lake. She is the ruler of the lake. She has a little bit of an issue. I'm not going to go into spoiler territory, but she has a huge, huge darkness in her past, which leads her to be extremely angry and extremely rash, and she can be quite dangerous, but it comes from a place of betrayal and of hurt, and she needs to learn a really important lesson as the story progresses. The other characters, we've got Raphael and Silas. They are two brothers. Raphael is 18 years old and Silas is 15 years old. And they're the two eldest sons of their family, so they're essentially in charge. And the two of them, in a way, could not be more different from each other. We have Raphael, who is the eldest, and he is a really kind, caring, patient soul, always there for everybody, always smiling, always singing. And then we have Silas, who is nicknamed Silent Si because he's very sullen. Doesn't really talk that much. When he does, it can be quite biting. He's the one who essentially orders his siblings around. But even though he's essentially, it's basically like good cop, bad cop in a way. But even though Silas could be considered bad cop, all of his sternness and resoluteness, it comes from a real sense of love because he cares so much for his family and he just wants to protect them. And then we've got Irima, who I absolutely love. She is a traveller girl. She just does not care what anyone thinks of her. She is, again, very caring, very intelligent, more so than necessarily people would give her credit for. And she just has a good time. She's very worldly. She's seen a lot more than anyone who lives in the little valley where the story takes place have ever seen. So she is not only a great source of wisdom and laugh, but she's also a rock for a lot of the characters to sort of fall back onto. As for basing them on anyone in particular, I didn't do that on purpose, but I can certainly see elements of people who I know and elements of myself in pretty much all the characters. So the whole thing that I wanted with these characters, as I've mentioned earlier in the live stream, is I didn't want there to be a protagonist and a villain. I didn't want there to be it's good versus bad or anyone to be evil. I just wanted this story to be based around the idea of misunderstandings and owning mistakes and ignorance of the other, and how that can influence so much and can spread so far, and how it doesn't really take much to just take a step back and overturn what has been laid down before you. So for that reason, I wanted all of the characters, even though they're all flawed, even though they all have their own things going on. I'd like to think that anybody could relate to them for a multitude of reasons. I certainly can, and going back through the story now, 10 years later, I relate to it in different ways than I did when I first wrote it back when I was 15. So it's it's one of those stories which it's a very simple story on the surface, but as I've said, that simplicity is its power, and the deeper you go into the story as well as the characters, the more you see. And if you can see yourselves in those characters, then that just makes me so happy. The fact that you can associate with them and that you can see yourselves in them, and if that means something to you as well as just entertaining you as being a good story, then that's honestly the greatest gift as an author that I can ever be given. So, yeah. Okay, Courtney. So is this one of your favorite books? That's like asking me to pick a favorite child. It's very difficult for me to ever pick a favorite book. It's impossible because they all mean so much to me for so many different reasons, and even the time periods when I wrote them, what I was going through when I wrote them, all the things that they embodied, that it's impossible to pick a favorite. But this one certainly has a very dear place in my heart because it was my debut novel. It was the one that started everything. Without Blindsighted Wanderer, we wouldn't have any of the others that came after it, and all of the ones that are yet to come. It was the one that started everything. So for that reason, I love it so much, and I love how its story, as I said, is so simple. But even back when I was 15, when I first wrote it, and when I wanted to just capture that feeling, I was so happy with what I was able to do with it and what I just felt in my heart that it was leading to. Not necessarily being published, being my first one that would be published, but just all of the feelings that it was opening up in me, and all of the ways that it was encouraging me to look at things and how I was going to explore them. It was just beautiful. And all of my books do that in various capacities, but this one was so special. And I think part of the reason for that is because even though I wrote the first draft when I was 15, but the story itself had been stewing in my mind ever since I was 7 years old, when I was first exposed to the original folktale, the original poetry that inspired it. So, in a sense, this story feels like it's grown up with me. It's not only my debut novel, but it's one of the stories out of all of them that has been with me for the longest time in various capacities. Even if it was just locked away up here, I was always aware of it, even from when I was 7 years old. So for that reason alone, it means so much to me. Even if it wasn't my debut novel, even if it was one that came out this year after this long, it means so much for that reason, that it's been with me for that long. And yeah, it's just your first novel always has a very special place in your heart. It always does. It's like your first child, I suppose. Okay, so just going back to the questions that was sent in to me. Will you release any of your other books in hardback? Short answer, I don't know. Just because behind the scenes, there's an awful lot which goes into the creation of hardbacks, and just creation of multiple editions of the same book in general. Because we now, with Blindsighted Wanderer, we have the ebook version, we have the paperback version, we have the hardback version, and behind the scenes, there's an awful lot of plates to spin in regards to all of them. I don't know if at this moment in time it will be feasible for me to release all of the others in hardback, but I'd like to think that that's one of the things that makes this one so special. The fact that it was my first ever published book, it's now my first ever hardback, and it very well may remain my my hardback, my only hardback, for quite a while yet. I do have other things on the cards, but whether they will involve hardbacks is another matter entirely. And I am still trying so hard to figure out how I'm going to produce the audiobooks. So I've talked about the audiobooks of my books for a while, and it hasn't come to fruition yet. And it's not that I've given up the ghost on it. I am still trying. But again, it's logistics of behind the scenes which are just throwing spanner after spanner in the works. and I can only do the best with what I have, where I am at this moment in time. And at this moment in time, I am not comfortable and I am not confident in the quality of the audiobooks that I would be able to produce. So for that reason, I would rather leave it and not put them out straight away than rush them and give you something which I know is not up to the quality that I would want it to be. So in regards to the hardbacks, I don't know. Maybe, potentially, we'll see. Watch this space. The audiobooks, yes, definitely coming. I just can't say when. So yeah, guys, if there's any other questions, as I mentioned, that you want me to answer, just keep popping them down below. It's lovely to see them popping up. So we've got yeah, a couple more that were sent in to me. Why did you choose to set this story at midsummer? So I wanted it to, really to be set at midsummer. It's funny that that this I should be doing all of this today actually, because I wanted it to be. It was always set at midsummer. Even the first draft was set at midsummer, and it's partially because I wanted the valley where it's set to have this real sense of place, and I didn't want it to be buried underneath like like loads of snow in winter, even though winter is my favorite season. I wanted the colours to come through and how vibrant this place is and how much of a little paradise it is, like a little gem, stuff of dreams this place would be. Anyone would want to live there. Just to juxtapose that under the surface, it's not as pretty and perfect as it seems. As well, we've also got Midsummer being the well, it's the shortest night and the longest day, which plays in quite drastically to Merrin's story and the fact that the Azrai cannot be touched by the sunlight. It's extremely dangerous to them. So we've got that going on as well. We've also it's also a little nod to Cheshire, where the legend originated, and that's because that's why I mentioned it's funny that I've released it today, because every midsummer, or the weekend closest to midsummer in Chester, which is like the city where I grew up, we have the Midsummer Watch Parade. And again, it's like a little thing, you know, the original folktales from Cheshire. Chester has the Midsummer Watch Parade, and that goes back to the 14th century, the 1400s, I should say. So about 180 or so years after the setting of Blindsighted Wanderer, and it's continued more or less to this day. It was only stopped briefly in the 1600s after Oliver Cromwell came to power, and then it was brought back, and it's been performed every midsummer, the weekend closest to midsummer, through the streets of Chester. Ever since, the only time recently that it hasn't run was the last 2 years, for obvious reasons, and it ran today. For the first time in 2 years, the Midsummer Watch Parade ran today, and it just so happens to be the anniversary day, of the release day for the anniversary edition. So it's just all linked, and I love it. Okay, another question from Emma. How did you come up with the book cover designs? They look so magical and fantastic. Thank you very much, Emma. So, as most of you probably know, I do all of my own cover designs, and I'm quite fortunate in that respect because I have that background in graphic design and with Photoshop and stuff. So I'm in the very fortunate position where, as well as writing the books, I can also do all the cover designs and do all of the interior formatting and all of the things that make them look pretty. With the cover designs for Blindsighted Wanderer, there have been 3 iterations of the cover. The very first one was back in 2012 when the first edition was published by Staccato Publishing, and that version I didn't have anything to do with. That was created by Paragraphic Designs, and it was a really nice cover. That was the first cover that it ever had. And then when I got the publishing rights back and re-released Blindsighted Wanderer independently in 2016, I redesigned the cover to this one right here. And then, of course, having the hardback come out, I knew it's a special edition. It's going to have an updated interior, all updated formatting on the inside. It needs a new cover as well. So I designed the cover for that one. Now, all of the covers have one thing in common. They all feature Merrin on the front. And I wanted to feature Merrin on the front of all of them because out of all of the characters in the book, she is the most visually interesting, as you can see. She has green hair, she has teal skin, she's got her purple eyes, she has this beautiful headdress in her hair. And as well as that, she's also essentially the driving force behind the entire novel. So really, she had to be centre stage. And I wanted her to be centre stage on all covers, hence why she is. But there's been various different iterations of the way that she was portrayed. So with all of the other ones, it's been with the first one from the first edition cover and the second edition cover, this one, it's a close-up of her face, and I liked that. I liked it that it was right up close to her face. But with the new one, I wanted it to be a bit more ethereal looking and be under the water as opposed to on top of it, and just show this feeling of not only weightlessness but also a kind of longing in a way. But longing for what? You'll have to see. As for all my other covers, there's a very specific process that I go through whenever I'm designing a cover for anybody, because I do cover design not just for my books but for other people. I do them for authors all over the world, and I always try and break it down to the simple things. Whenever I'm writing a book, I get a very distinct feeling from it, and I want to be able to capture that feeling. And one of the ways that I can really focus on figuring out what that feeling is going to translate into visually is to come up with a colour palette. So normally I get, as well as getting a feeling from it, I get a sort of 2 or 3 very distinct colours that I associate with a story. So for Blindsighted Wanderer, it was green and blue and white. So on all of the covers, even the one, the first edition one, which I didn't really have any say in, those colours are there: blue, green and white. And it's the same with this one. We have blue, green and white, and it's the same on the hardback edition one. It's the same with all of them. I take that colour palette and I use that to help guide the cover. If there's a character who is very visually interesting, like Merrin, I naturally will want to put them centre stage. I did that with Run Like Clockwork, for example. The novel of mine, which came out earlier this year, had Phoebe Feline on the front cover because she was the most visually interesting of all the characters in that. So I like my covers really to be a part of the story. I know the old adage is don't judge a book by its cover, but people do, and I know that. So if people are going to judge a book by its cover, then let the cover be an extension of the book, not just something that's been slapped on there just to draw the eye. I like my covers to be something that, even if they look simple on the surface, the more you dig into them, the more you see. Even in a series like the Tragic Silence series, there's still so much there's a lot of consistency in them to show you that it is a series. Every single one of them, for example, has a moon phase in the background, and depending on the moon phase, that actually shows you what order the books come in. So we start off with a crescent moon, and then it waxes through to full, and that shows you the order of the books. But again, it's a nice little subtle detail that you wouldn't necessarily, you know, you don't need to be told it, but now that you know it, you're not going to be able to unsee it. And I like to do that with all of my books, that all of my covers, that they're an extension of whatever the book is. It just adds to the experience, I think. And it's the same when I do the interior formatting. I like them to be an extension of what you're going to read, so it can just further draw you into that world and really give you an all-round experience as a reader. I always appreciated books that when I was younger, and I still do. And I feel very fortunate that I'm in the position that I can do that, that I can do all of this formatting and all this cover design by myself and have full creative control, so that whatever world I want to bring you into, I can immerse you in it fully if you are willing to join me there. Okay, guys, so I think that's all of the questions. If you have any more, now's your chance to drop them before the stream ends. Gosh, we've been on for nearly an hour. Gosh. But yes, I just thinking about the book launching today. This is just, as I said at the beginning of the stream, it's such a strange cocktail of feelings, because it's a feeling that I've had before whenever I've launched a book. And not to trivialize it, that's always an amazing feeling and it will never get old. But this one is really mixed with nostalgia and with just pride in how far this one has come and how far it's brought me. I just keep thinking back to little 21-year-old me, baby author me, holding this book in her hands for the very first time, her first book in her hands for the very first time. And I can tell you, I was ugly crying. I was so just overwhelmed by everything that was happening. I never in a million years thought that it would happen, certainly not as young as I was. And when I think back, I'm happy that it did happen when I was that age, because it really sowed the seeds of one dream had come true, but it sowed the seeds of so many more. So many more that I feel I'm still continuing to realize. And I will never turn around and say that I have mastered the art of writing. That's a lie. No one can ever master an art form. And I will always be learning. And I love the fact that I'll always be learning. Every single book that I write, I think, will always be an improvement on the ones that came before, not necessarily on an emotional level, but on a level of skill. And it's so nice to have carried this one with me for so long, not just these past 10 years, but also throughout my entire life, ever since I was 7 years old, when I was first inspired by that legend and by that poetry. To think that I took something like that, just a couple of poems and a little folk tale from a corner of the world that hardly anyone knows about, hardly even any people who live in Cheshire know about. And I could take that and reshape it and stretch it out and recreate it into what I've always personally perceived as just a very open love letter to kindness and acceptance and owning one's mistakes. I just think it's a really beautiful thing to have put into the very first novel that you release into the world. Okay, there's one more question from Emma before we end the stream. That is, how do you come up with the titles of your books? So again, very similar to the covers and the interior formatting. I like my titles to have layers. They're all of my stories. So pretty much every aspect of all of my stories, every single thing that goes into them is full of layers. But the layers aren't necessary for you to be able to enjoy the story if that's all you want to do. You know, I'd like to think that you could pick up any one of my books and you could read it just as a story and hopefully be entertained by it, because that is essentially what I'm doing. I'm entertaining you with my words. But there are so many layers in there. Layers from myself, layers that I've perceived from the world around me, layers from other texts and other influences. And if people can spot, if people spot them, if they then great, you know, it'll only enrich the story. But and if people can really connect with whatever is going on with those layers, if it speaks to them, if it helps them, then that is just, as I've said, such a gift. Because my stories are therapy essentially for myself. I use them for so many things, not just to get a story out of my head. So many layers, so many layers. And if people if people connect with those layers, then that is the greatest gift that I can be given. In regards to the titles, it is an extension of that. In regards to Blindsighted Wanderer, we have, as I mentioned, the four main characters. That all interlink. We've got Merrin, Raphael, Silas, and Irima. Now, break the title down slightly. There's one instance where the title can be taken extremely literally, but I am not going to tell you what it is. All I'll say is that for those four main characters in particular, but arguably a couple of other characters as well in the background, the title can be broken down in that all of them are either literally or metaphorically blind to some aspect that is going on in their lives or around them. And they all must wander, again, either literally or metaphorically, in order to find the tools that will give them sight again. And like I said, some of it is literal, some of it is metaphorical. And you can look at it a million different ways, and you can take from it a million different things. But my titles are always way more than just a title. If you look at pretty much any title of mine, Blindsighted Wanderer, the Tragic Silence series, all of the ones in there, Run Like Clockwork, the just all of them, then even the one that I've written, which isn't published yet, The Shade Between Shadows, which will be coming out in the next couple of years, every single one of them full of layers, full of detail, but only if you want to look for them will you see them. And you don't even have to see them if you don't want to. You can just enjoy them as is. But I'd like to think that they're nice in 3D for people who want to look for them. Excuse me. Okay, everyone. So I think we should leave it there. Oh my gosh, my throat's so dry. Excuse me. Oh, I've been talking for too long, and my drink's all the way over there. Okay, so because I'm beginning to, my throat's beginning to dry up seriously, and we have been up on the stream for nearly an hour. I want to thank you guys so much, so much for joining me for the stream tonight, especially after all of the confusion we had. I'm so sorry for all of that. Technology hates me sometimes. But we got it up and running in the end, and I'm so glad that you could join me. Thank you so much. And just before we leave, I'll finish with a couple of little announcements. Blindsighted Wanderer, the 10th anniversary edition, is out now in hardback. It's also available in paperback and ebook on Amazon. Those are the original versions, but the updated. Sorry, the special edition is the hardback. That one has the new interior formatting. It has a special author's note in the back, which is exclusive to the hardback. We've also got a brand new artwork illustration for Blindsighted Wanderer, which is also exclusive to the hardback. You will not see that anywhere else. So if you want to grab a copy of the hardback, it is available right now on Amazon. There are some territorial derivatives of Amazon where it is not available yet. Rather frustratingly, most of Europe and the United Kingdom being among them. So if you would like to get a copy of Blindsighted Wanderer in hardback for the special anniversary edition, then and you are in Europe or in the UK, and Amazon.co.uk or Amazon France or Amazon Spain, for example, are not stocking it yet, you can get it from Amazon DE, Amazon Germany. I know that's really weird at the moment, but it's just a slight delay on Amazon's end. They are working to get it fixed. I was hoping it would be fixed before today, but alas, it isn't. But all is not lost. You can get a copy from Amazon Germany right now. So if you want to, that's that. The links are all over my social media for that, so if you want to grab a copy, you know where to go. Leading on from that, we will be having the big signing and launch party for Blindsighted Wanderer in a couple of weeks' time on the Saturday, the 2nd of July. I am going to be at the fantastic Susie K at the Secret Garden on Bridge Street in Chester, in Cheshire, from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. I'm going to be doing a talk on the history of the book, and you can ask me all the questions that you'd like. I'm also going to be I know you weren't there, Courtney. I'm going to be there signing copies of the book. I'm going to be reading from the book. I'll be reading from the special anniversary hardback. And did I mention that this amazing shop also does amazing tea and cakes? Come down and get some tea and cakes. Yes, come on down to the Secret Garden. Susie K at the Secret Garden. That's on Saturday, the 2nd of July, 12 o'clock. And that's Bridge Street Row in Chester, in Cheshire. It would be amazing to see you there. The more the merrier. Come down. Come say hello. And share it around. There is an event page on my Facebook that gives you all the details. If you go over to the events page on my website, all the details for the signing are there as well. After the signing at Susie K, I will be appearing in August at the legendary Llangollen Fairy Festival, and I will be appearing in character, in cosplay, for the very first time as Merrin from Blindsighted Wanderer. It's the first time I've ever cosplayed one of my own characters, and she will be making an appearance at the legendary Llangollen Fairy Festival in August, and also at the Winter Liverpool Comic Con in November. So with that all being said, that's pretty much everything coming up for Blindsighted Wanderer. Thank you again so much for joining me today. Also, I'll just throw out there, guys, if you are not signed up for my newsletter, head on over to my website and you can get all the latest news, and you can get short stories a week in advance before they're released anywhere else. I also have my Patreon, where I do live streams just like this every single week with reading you guys fairy tales from the Brothers Grimm and Hans Christian Andersen. You get exclusive behind the scenes goodies that are not shared anywhere else, so you get these short stories a month in advance. So there's loads of good stuff on there. So if you're interested in supporting me over on Patreon, then just head over to www.patreon.com/ECHibs, all one word. And make sure you're signed up for the newsletter. Check out the events page for where I'm going to be appearing for the rest of this year. And I really hope that I'll see you guys at Susie K's on the 2nd of July. It would be amazing to see you there. I was there for the signing of Run Like Clockwork Volume 1 earlier this year. I'm going to be back there again in November for the signing and launch of Run Like Clockwork Volume 2. So feel free to come along, say hi. It would be amazing to see you there. And so thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for all of your support, whether you've been with me for 10 years or 10 days. I just want you guys to know how much I appreciate you and how much your support means to me. You are my employers. I could not do any of this without you. And to know that my work and my words mean that much to you, that you continue to support me, that you reach out to me and tell me, it's beyond a gift. It's beyond a gift that keeps on giving. It's just such a beautiful, it is. It's beauty, what you give me. It's the kindest beauty that you could ever give me. So thank you so much for 10 incredible years. And here's to not only 10 more, but many more. And I really hope that you'll continue to walk this road alongside me. Thank you. So I'm going to end the stream here. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful evening wherever you are in the world. Enjoy Blindsighted Wanderer. and I will see you guys very, very soon. Take care. Mwah. Love and light, everyone. Bye.